The message arrived at precisely 3:47 p.m. as I was reviewing the fourth quarter projections with Marcus, my CFO. He was saying something about currency risks, and all I could see was the screen of my smartphone lying on the black onyx desk. It glowed, cold and insistent, cutting through the dim light of the office. "Don't come for New Year's. My fiancée is a corporate lawyer at Davis Polk. She can't know about your situation." I froze. Situation. One word. Dry, official, like a medical diagnosis. It had reduced my entire life, all those years of titanic, frantic labor, to something shameful and embarrassing, something that needed to be hidden from my important fiancé at Davis Polk. My throat tightened. Before I could exhale, the shared family chat exploded, an avalanche of excuses crashing down on me from the screen. Boom. "Marcus is right, dear. This is important for his career." "Dad?" "Amanda comes from a very prestigious family. I need to make the right impression." "Sister Jenna? Maybe next year, when you sort out your affairs." I watched the messages pile up one after another, as if building an invisible wall between me and my own family. 3 dots flashed under Marcus's name again. My heart sank. He was writing again. "Marcus, Amanda thinks I come from a family of successful people. Your presence will ruin that picture. You understand, right?" "I understand." "Oh, yes, brother. I understand perfectly. I understand that success in this family is measured by Ivy League degrees, club memberships, and the right connections, not by something you built from nothing. That you're a disgraceful detail that doesn't fit into their flawless, glossy veneer." There was a knock on the door, sharply but respectfully. My executive assistant, David, poked his head into the office. "Ms. Chin, the board of directors wants to reschedule for tomorrow's strategy meeting. They're concerned about the Davis and Polk schedule." Davis and Polk. The words struck me like a whip. I raised a finger, asking for a minute. My eyes were dry and hot. David, catching something in my expression, nodded instantly and walked away, disappearing behind the frosted glass. And the phone was blurry. "We're doing this for you too, honey. You'll be embarrassed. Amanda's friends are all Ivy League lawyers and investment bankers." "Mom." "Her father is a senior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. They're serious people." "Dad." "Serious people. Unlike me." My breathing became even and icy. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and typed 2 words. Each one was like a drop of poison, savored on the tip of my tongue. "Understood. Marcus, thank you for your understanding. I'll make it up to you." I placed the phone face down. My voice didn't waver when I called David. He reappeared in the doorway holding a leather folder with a gold-embossed logo. Meridian Technologies. Our logo. My logo. "Tell the board, 2 p.m. is approaching, and confirm that Davis & Polk is sending its entire M&A team to the meeting on January 2nd. "Already confirmed." David's voice was dispassionate, businesslike. "Senior partners, associates, everyone. This is potentially their largest client acquisition of the year." The corners of my lips twitched. Not a smile, a grin. Perfect. Images flashed through my mind. Not now, no. Before. As a child, I was a disappointment in the prep stage. Marcus was the golden boy, team captain with a future at Princeton. Jenna was a princess with her own country club. And I? Quiet. Weird. The girl who, instead of hanging out with friends, spent her nights coding, listening to the keys whisper to her in the only language she understood. I once overheard my mom say to a friend, "Sarah needs to work on her social skills. She's very private." My dad was more straightforward. "Your brother will run a Fortune 500 company someday. You need to think about realistic goals." When the acceptance letter to MIT arrived, they didn't even have dinner. The letter sat on the desk for 3 days. "Computer science," my dad muttered. "Well, I guess someone needs to do tech support." I graduated from college at 20 and founded my first company at 21. It burned to the ground in 8 months, and the family chat room was buzzing with good advice. Dad suggested an MBA. Marcus wanted an entry-level position. Mom wanted to join an established company. I didn't tell them about the second company. Or the third. The fourth was Meridian. I started in an empty studio with $15,000 and an algorithm I'd been working on since college. I didn't call them when they landed their first client. I didn't scream with delight when their performance soared by 34%. I kept quiet when Forbes called, when we closed our $12 million Series A round. By the day Sequoia Capital invested $185 million, I already understood everything. They didn't need to know. They had painted the ceiling for me, and I didn't feel the need to tell them how hard I crashed through it. And at that fateful Thanksgiving 2 years ago, Marcus brought Amanda. Perfect. From Harvard Law School. A senior associate at Davis Polk, Marcus beamed, the youngest in her class. What law? Mom enthused. Mergers and acquisitions, Amanda replied, flashing a flawless smile. We work on large corporate deals, mostly in the tech sector. I remember that look in her eyes. At that dinner party, she turned to me politely, with a slight condescending smile. What do you do, Sarah? The question sounded ritualistic, obligatory for an uninteresting guest. I work in tech, I breathed out, hating myself for this timidity, for the fact that at 30, running a company, I had cowered before her like a misbehaving schoolgirl. Oh, great. What company? Her tone was smooth as polished marble. A startup, supply chain software. And I saw it. A momentary, subtle change. Her eyes, so lively and interested when she'd been talking to Marcus about case law, suddenly glazed over slightly, dimmed. Sounds interesting, she said, and it was the most meaningless, most mechanical phrase I'd ever heard. There wasn't a shred of interest in her, just polite rejection. Marcus, my protector, squeezed her hand. Sarah's still trying to find her way. The startup world is harsh. He said it with such paternal kindness, with such compassion for me, my poor wayward sister, that my stomach twisted. Oh, absolutely, Amanda immediately chimed in, nodding expertly. We see that all the time. Most fail. But it's great that you're trying. Very brave, Marcus added, his praise bitterer than any insult. I nodded, looking down at my plate, and started talking about the weather. That was 18 months ago. An eternity. And a moment. Since then, Meridian has exploded. Not grown, exploded. 450 people in 4 countries. A valuation of $2.1 billion after a Series C. My face, with a cold gaze unfamiliar even to me, stared out from the Fortune 40 under 40 list. And most importantly, the acquisition negotiations for TechFlow Solutions, our arch-rival, overfed competitor. A deal that would change the game forever. And do you know who represented TechFlow in that deal? Davis Polk, of course. I didn't build an empire to prove anything to them. No. In the beginning, there was the problem. A beautiful, complex puzzle that kept me up at night, and that intoxicating, absolute feeling at 2 a.m. when the code finally clicked, and I, alone in the silence, knew I'd found the solution. It was pure ecstasy, something they would never understand. But their disdain, it became fuel. Every regret they expressed, every piece of advice to get a real job, every admiring glance at Marcus turned into a brick in the wall of my stubbornness. An extra hour of work, another client. They thought I had no place in their glittering world? Well, I'd build my own and dictate the rules. My team knew nothing. David merely noted my isolation. Rebecca, my tech director, appreciated that I wasn't distracted by phone calls. James, the chief legal officer, saw my obsession but didn't ask about its roots. One day, after a wild, triumphant release, Rebecca said, "You're different. Most people do it for fame or money. But you, it's like you're trying to rewrite some old, unfair history." "Maybe so," I replied. And then the Davis Polk deal came. TechFlow was falling apart, and its aging founders wanted a golden parachute. And in the documents, I saw her name, Amanda Whitmore, Senior Associate. My heart sank for a moment. "Problem?" James asked. "No," I managed to say. "Everything's fine." I didn't say a word to him. I just told him to continue. I celebrated New Year's alone, with spicy Thai noodles and champagne that was way too good for such an evening. My phone vibrated feverishly. Someone else's life blossomed in the family chat. Photos from a glamorous rooftop party where Marcus and Amanda glowed like dolls straight out of a magazine cover. My parents so proud. Jenna so ecstatic. Amanda's dad just closed a $2 billion merger, Dad wrote. And, almost at midnight, a private message arrived from Marcus. Thanks again for understanding. It's easier this way. I replied something neutral, clutching my phone, and silently I thought, in 32 hours, your perfect bride will walk into my office and realize what a terrible mistake you've all made. I raised my glass in front of the huge, dark window. Happy New Year, Sarah. Let's make it interesting. And then it arrived. The day. I was in the office by 6 a.m. My office on the 52nd floor hovered above a sleeping Seattle. David, always there, was already waiting with coffee. The Davis Polk team will arrive at 10, full complement. Amanda Whitmore is the second deal lead. I nodded, swallowing the bitter, scalding drink. Perfect. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. TechFlow is trying to back out on the earn-out terms. I looked at her, and all the doubts, all the old pain, evaporated, leaving only a cold, diamond-like hardness. Let them try. Our offer is final. James joined us, his face pale with fatigue, but his eyes blazing with the cold fire of confidence. I've double-checked everything. 3 times. We're protected from every angle. This is the most flawless acquisition structure I've ever seen in my career. I glanced around at my team gathered in the office. They'd dedicated 6 months of their lives to this deal. Sleepless nights, ruined weekends, endless edits and debates. They deserved more than just victory. They deserved to see the final act, to see the old hierarchy crumble. Conference room A, my voice rang out, even and clear as a blade. I'll take the opening remarks. Rebecca, you're in technology integration. James, legal. David, make sure the guests have everything they need. Coffee, water, charge tablets, everything. Are you leading the introductions? Rebecca raised an eyebrow in surprise. I always kept a low profile, preferring to observe. Today, yes, I nodded. Today will be different. At 9:45, there was a soft knock. David. They're in the lobby. Security is escorting them out. I stood up and adjusted the lapels of my jacket. Dark blue velvet Tom Ford, tailored to my measurements. A silk Hermes scarf, light as breath. Louboutin shoes, which made me feel unshakable. I wasn't dressing for them. I was dressing for myself, so that every detail would remind me who I was now. That resigned, comfortable Sarah, who could be ordered not to come, no longer existed. There was someone who had built all this from nothing, and now she was about to enter the hall. Conference room A was our throne room, a 12-meter-long table of black marble, cold and gleaming like ice. Panoramic windows, clouds drifting past, and on the far wall, our logo, etched into the glass, seemed to float in the air. Meridian. I was already seated at the head of the table when the doors opened. David ushered them in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meridian Technologies. The Davis Polk team entered first, senior partners carved from expensive wood and self-assuredness, carrying leather briefcases that had seen more than one scandal. Behind them, young associates, trying to emulate their posture. Amanda was third. She entered, her head buried in a tablet, leafing through documents. Businesslike, focused. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a flawless chignon. The theory suit, charcoal-colored, impeccable. She hadn't yet looked up. Following her, with the air of a man about to be executed, was TechFlow CEO Richard Morrison. Behind him, his chairman, gray-haired and arrogant. David indicated seats, and then Amanda looked up. First, she slid her gaze over the faces around the table, noting Rebecca, James. Then, slowly, reluctantly, her eyes drifted toward me. And then they stopped. I watched as reality crumbled in her mind. It was almost physical. Her tablet trembled in her hands. She barely held on to it. Her lips parted silently. In her eyes, complete, utter incomprehension mingled with horror. "Sarah?" she whispered, a sound that echoed in the still room like a gunshot. The senior partner next to her, Lawrence Whitfield, frowned. "Are you acquainted with Miss Chin?" I allowed myself a small, indifferent smile. "Good morning, Amanda. Please take your seat." She didn't move, frozen as a statue. "It's you." The silence in the room grew thick, oppressive. Lawrence looked from me to his protégé. "Amanda, Sorry," she swallowed, her voice betrayingly trembling. "I just didn't expect—" "I'm the CEO of Meridian Technologies," I finished softly for her, my softness sharper than a shout. Apparently that question somehow got missed. Her face paled, then flushed a deep, unhealthy color. She looked at me, fragments of memory flickering in her eyes. Thanksgiving. Condescension. Most fail. "You said you worked at a startup." "I do. At this one," I said, gesturing faintly around the room. Rebecca, sitting to my right, bit her lip to keep from laughing. James maintained an icy demeanor, but I saw a glint of harsh amusement in his eyes. Lawrence Whitfield was a veteran. He swept the situation together with a single, commanding flicker of his eyebrows. "Well then, shall we begin?" Everyone except Amanda sank into their chairs. She collapsed into hers, closer to the middle of the table, unable to tear her eyes away from me. One of the junior associates whispered something in her ear. She merely shook her head blankly, her fingers clutching her pen. I stood up and turned on the screen. The Meridian logo flashed on it. "Thank you all for being here. I am Sarah Chin, founder and CEO of Meridian Technologies. We've been working hard to get to this day." My voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. This was my home, my rules. "We've gathered to complete the acquisition of TechFlow Solutions. Our final offer is $840 million. The structure is $600 million in cash and $240 million in performance-based earnings over 3 years. I led them through the slides: market analysis, synergies, technology roadmap. Every word was spot on. Richard Morrison jumped in with caustic questions. I countered with numbers, charts, and forecasts that his own team couldn't dispute. There was a different kind of tension in the room, respect mixed with caution. 40 minutes later, Lawrence spoke. "Ms. Chin, your forecasts suggest 40% annual growth. That's quite aggressive." "Meridian has grown at an average of 47% annually over the last 4 years," I countered. "We don't build castles in the air. We're conservative in our estimates." Another partner, Patricia Huang, nodded, a glimmer of professional approval in her gaze. "Your legal due diligence was impeccable, rarely thorough." "We're not used to wasting time," I said. "This deal is logical. TechFlow is walking away with a decent premium. We're getting the market. Everything is elegant." Amanda remained silent the entire time. She stared at the table, her pen poised above her notepad. Lawrence, noticing her state, gestured for her attention. "Amanda, did you want to cover the intellectual property transfer?" She flinched as if struck. She looked up at him, confused. Yes, the protocols." She fidgeted, scrolling through the documents on her tablet. Her fingers visibly trembled. Patricia quietly prompted, "Technology transfer schedule." "Yes, technology." Amanda's voice broke, becoming thin and fragile. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Excuse me, I need a moment." She stood up so abruptly that her chair screeched and ran out of the room, not looking around. As if the air in the room had suddenly become toxic to her. Lawrence Whitfield's jaw tightened, revealing his jaw muscles. He was beside himself, but his iron will prevailed. "My deepest apologies. I suggest we take a short maintenance break." The room instantly emptied. Only I remained. As soon as the door closed, Rebecca burst into laughter, restrained yet hysterical. "What the hell was that?" She looked like she saw all 7 mortal grell in you at once. That's my brother's fiancée, I said calmly, savoring every word. James's eyebrows rose to his hairline. The fiancé? The one marrying your brother? The one whose presence on New Year's could have ruined the picture because of my situation. Rebecca was dumbfounded. Are you kidding? He wrote me on December 28th. It was in black and white. His fiancée is a lawyer at Davis Polk, and she's not supposed to know about my situation. David, listening by the door, let out something between a cough and a chuckle. And your situation is all this? He gestured widely at the luxurious room, the city view, our logo. Apparently so. Being a CEO is a family disgrace. James leaned back in his chair and whistled. So she didn't even know who you were? She thought I was a loser from some startup. She was condescendingly sympathetic to me over Thanksgiving. Rebecca was now grinning broadly. This is brilliant. The best day of my career. I've never seen anyone's reality collapse like that. Through the glass wall, I saw Amanda in the hallway. She thrashed about, holding the phone to her ear. Her free hand tugged helplessly at the hair at her temple, then pressed it to her forehead. She looked like someone trying to hold together a world that was falling apart. Should we be worried about the deal? James asked matter-of-factly, but his eyes were filled with excitement. Not at all, I snapped. Davis Polk is too professional to ruin an $840 million deal over a personal melodrama. They won't hesitate to pull her out if necessary. Exactly 5 minutes later, Lawrence Whitfield returned alone. His face was a mask of icy calm. Ms. Chin, my apologies again. Associate Whitmore has encountered unforeseen personal circumstances. I will personally handle her portion of the presentation. Of course, I nodded with a slight, meaningless smile. I hope everything works out. His gaze revealed his fury at this absurd interruption, but he didn't show it. Shall we continue? We reconvened. Amanda hadn't returned. Her seat remained empty, a silent reproach. Patricia Huang picked up the intellectual property questions without a hitch. The meeting flowed like a well-oiled machine. By 1 o'clock, everything was decided. Richard Morrison, CEO of TechFlow, stood and extended his hand. His handshake was firm, his eyes filled with bitter but sincere respect. Ms. Chin, you've built something magnificent. It's an honor to leave my life's work in such hands. We'll preserve the best of what you've created, I promised. And it wasn't just an empty courtesy, but a business imperative. Lawrence Whitfield was gathering papers. Our firm will prepare the final package of documents by Friday. Perfect, I said. Thank you for your smooth work. As the Davis Polk team exited, Patricia Huang paused for a moment. Ms. Chin, I'm not aware of the details of what happened to Ms. Whitmore, but I apologize again for the interruption. It's fine, I shrugged. It happens to everyone. She looked at me intently, and something like understanding, mixed with curiosity, flashed in her gaze. You've demonstrated remarkable restraint. As soon as the door closed behind the last of them, David sighed. Your phone, it's gone crazy. I picked it up from the desk. It was hot with frantic activity. 43 missed calls, 67 messages. This whole barrage hit me about 20 minutes into the meeting. Marcus, call me now. Marcus, what the hell is this, Sarah? Marcus, Amanda is hysterical. She can't speak. Mom, Sarah, honey, what's going on? Marcus, they're talking about some kind of monstrous misunderstanding. Marcus, you told her you worked at a startup. You mislead her. Dad, this is so confusing. Someone explain this whole thing. Jenna, have you been lying to us this whole time? I slowly scrolled through this avalanche of panic and anger, my mouth tasting like ash and a strange, chilling calm. Then I opened the family chat and typed just 7 words. I never lied. You never asked. The phone rang immediately. Marcus. I watched his name pulsate across the screen and hung up. He called back. Again and again. I simply switched it to silent mode and placed the phone face down on the cold marble desk. David knocked on the door. You have a board meeting at 1400. in 10 minutes. I'll be there, I nodded, without looking up. And there's a woman in the lobby. She insists she's your mother. I closed my eyes. Inhale. Exhale. Take her upstairs. Mom appeared in the doorway of my office 5 minutes later. She must have rushed here like crazy. Her expensive cashmere coat was unbuttoned. Her hair, always impeccable, was disheveled. She paused in the doorway, and her gaze, wild and confused, slid around the spacious office, the panoramic windows, and the silver-framed fortune cover on the wall. Her lips trembled. "Sarah," she breathed, and there was genuine, animal-like confusion in her voice. What is all this?" "It's my company, Mom," I said quietly, enunciating each word clearly. "Meridian Technologies. I founded it 6 years ago." "6 years," she whispered, and, as if struck down, sank into the chair opposite my desk. Her face was gray. "6 years and you haven't said a word." "You never asked me what I do, Mom. Really." "You said tech, a startup." "It is a startup," I retorted, my voice cold and merciless. "It just didn't fail. It took off." Her gaze darted around the walls again, to the view from the window, trying to reconcile this dazzling reality with the pathetic image they all cherished. "Marcus said, Amanda met you at some negotiations. You were leading a takeover. We're buying TechFlow Solutions for $840 million, I confirmed, each word falling like a heavy hammer. They're represented by Davis and Polk. Amanda's firm, yes." I saw her hands, resting on her purse, begin to tremble treacherously. She called Marcus hysterically, screaming that you were the CEO. He thought she'd gotten it wrong, thought maybe you were an assistant to someone important and she'd been mistaken. "I'm the CEO, Mom, the founder. I've been that since the second I registered the company in my rented studio, with $15,000 in the bank." "$15,000? Her voice broke, becoming thin and fragile. "I don't understand. When Marcus got that consulting job, we thought you were struggling." "I was building an empire." "And you allowed yourself to think I was barely making ends meet," I exhaled, the pent-up bitterness rising in my throat. "Remember Thanksgiving? When Amanda asked, I said, I work in tech at a startup. It was the honest truth, but I didn't add that I owned it. She didn't ask." I paused, forcing my breathing to even out. She just immediately assumed I was failing, and she felt sorry for me. "You all did that." Mom winced, as if she'd been struck. "That's unfair." "Really?" My calm was worse than my scream. "When the letter from MIT came, Dad said, someone needs to do tech support. When my first company burned down, you advised me to get a real job. When Marcus became a partner, you threw a catering party in his honor. And when Meridian closed Series A for $12 million, I was 23, Mom, and you didn't even know it happened." I looked at her straight on, unwaveringly. "I didn't tell you because you yourself clearly defined the limits of my capabilities, in your eyes." She leaned back in her chair as if physically jolted. Her eyes were filled with panic, confusion, and resentment. A dull, childish resentment. "And what is this, revenge? You built all this for revenge?" "No," I said quietly. "That's called living your life. Building something that makes you proud. You decided I was a disappointment to your family. I simply stopped wasting my energy trying to change that. Marcus says you ruined his New Year." "I wasn't there for his New Year," I retorted. "That's the whole point." "You know perfectly well what I mean." For the first time, despair crept into her voice. "Amanda is humiliated. She told her entire family that Marcus comes from a successful, respectable family. And then she comes to a meeting and finds out that his sister," she waved her hand helplessly toward my windows, "is more successful than they could have ever imagined. This is cruel, Sarah." "What?" I rose from the table, and my height, my posture, my entire being suddenly filled the space. "I have a board meeting in 3 minutes, Mom. Stay in town, we'll have dinner. But right now, I have a company to manage." She stood up too, frantically throwing on her coat. She turned around at the door. Her eyes were wet. "Your father, he's very upset." "I'm sorry to hear that. We thought we knew you." "You never tried to find out," I whispered after her as she was leaving. "You decided who I was when I was 16, and you haven't even bothered to check since." The door closed quietly. The board meeting dragged on until 4:30. Numbers, graphs, strategies, a world where everything was subject to logic and calculation. When I returned to the office, David was already waiting with a bottle of 25-year-old whiskey and 2 crystal shot glasses. "Is it that bad?" I asked, taking off my jacket. "The family called 17 more times, and your brother is in the lobby." I poured 2 fingers of the golden liquid. Neat. "Show him out." Marcus walked into my office and he seemed smaller, shrunken. He wore his corporate armor, a navy blue suit, an immaculate shirt, a tie the color of blood, the uniform of a man who spent his entire life playing the role of success. He glanced around the room, the same way Mom had, and finally fixed his gaze on me. "Oh my God, Sarah." "Hi, Marcus." Are you really?" He couldn't form a sentence. "Amanda said you were the CEO. I told her she was wrong, that you were at some small software company, and she sent me your profile from Forbes." He handed me his phone. My photo was on the screen. A cold gaze, my hair pulled back. The headline, 40 under 40, net worth estimated at $400 million. He looked up at me. There was something elusive in them, shock, anger, and underneath it all, a gnawing, humiliating fear. "Is that true?" "The estimate is low," I replied indifferently, sipping my whiskey. A fire spread across my chest. "But overall, yes." He collapsed heavily into the chair our mother had just vacated. "Why? Why didn't you say anything?" "And when, Marcus?" My voice remained level. "When you spent an hour and a half talking about Amanda's career at the engagement party? When Dad condescendingly explained the basics of consulting to me at Christmas dinner? Or maybe when you wrote to me not to come because I'd ruin the picture?" "That's not what I meant." "You meant exactly that," I interrupted him, the ice in my tone melting, revealing steel. "Every word. I was your disgrace. You didn't want your perfect bride to find out her future husband had a loser sister." "I didn't call you a loser," he blurted, but his voice held no conviction, only a confused rage. "You said I'd embarrass you," I snapped, each word falling like a sharpened knife. "You wrote that Amanda shouldn't know about my situation." I slowly raised my glass of whiskey, the lamplight flickering in the dark amber liquid. "My situation, Marcus, is this. All of this." His gaze darted around the office again, at the logo on the wall, at my impeccable, cold confidence. Anger simmered within him, but beneath it lay something deeper. Fear. Fear that his own worldview had been false. "I just don't understand why you hid all this. How could you keep such a thing so quiet?" "I wasn't hiding anything," I countered calmly. "I just cut you out of the equation. When I started Meridian, I worked 100 hours a week. I slept on a camp mattress in an empty office. I lived on instant noodles and black coffee. And at every family gathering, every holiday, you, Jenna, my parents, vied with each other to talk about your real victories, your careers, your connections. And I just sat there and smiled, silently. You could have shared. Tell me what you're working on." I tried. My composure began to crack, a lingering old ache creeping into my voice. "Remember that Christmas 2 years ago? I mentioned we'd signed our first major client, a logistics company with a $2 billion turnover. Dad immediately steered the conversation toward your promotion to partner. You didn't even nod. So I stopped trying." I sipped my whiskey, letting the fire burn my throat. "I built this company with people who saw me not as Marcus's little sister, but as a leader, with investors who risked millions because they believed in my algorithm, with a team for whom my word was enough. They didn't need me to prove my worth, unlike you." He was silent, clenching and unclenching his fists. Then he exhaled, and his voice became quiet, almost plaintive. "Amanda, she's completely confused." Amanda looked at me from the height of her Harvard diploma and pitied me, I retorted mercilessly. "And you allowed her. In fact, you encouraged it." "What am I supposed to tell her now?" "It's not my problem, Marcus. Solve your own problems." He jumped to his feet, and now the anger finally burst forth, eclipsing his confusion. "You made me look like a complete idiot in front of her and her family." "No." My words were quiet, but with such force that he froze. "You made a fool of yourself. You decided your sister was a failure, and you built your relationship, your facade, on that lie. You bear the responsibility for that. Do you understand that this could ruin everything? My engagement, my relationship with her family?" "Then you have a choice," I said, staring at him unblinkingly. "What choice?" "Spend the rest of your life apologizing to them for your sister's success, or figure out why you so desperately needed me to be a failure from the start." He looked at me for a few seconds, his face contorted with a mixture of hatred and fear. Then he turned abruptly and walked out, slamming the door. The resounding sound hung in the air for a long time. The next 2 weeks were chaos, but predictable chaos. Amanda, it turned out, had requested an urgent transfer to the Washington, D.C. office of Davis Polk. The firm, which valued peace above all else, granted the request immediately. Lawrence Whitfield sent me a formal letter of apology for the unprofessional incident and a bottle of Chateau Margaux so vintage it cost more than my brother a month's salary. The TechFlow acquisition went off without a hitch. Richard Morrison sent a touching, handwritten thank you for preserving the spirit of his company. Marcus and Amanda postponed their engagement party indefinitely. The family chat fell into a deathly, ominous silence. And then, on January 18th, a message from my father arrived. "Can we talk? Just you and me." We met in a quiet coffee shop a stone's throw from my house. Neutral territory. He was already seated at a table by the window and looked older. Not in years, but in something else. Weary to the core. "Your mother insists I apologize," he began without preamble. "What do you think?" I asked, not sitting down. He stirred his now cold coffee for a long time, not looking at me. "I read that profile in Fortune, from cover to cover. You've built something remarkable." He looked up at me, and there was none of his usual condescension in his eyes, only weary bewilderment. And I knew nothing about this. "I know," I said quietly, sinking into a chair. "The article said you started with $15,000 in a 400-square-foot studio, while he swallowed hard, while I was advising you to get an MBA and get a real job." "Yes." He fell silent. A light, nasty rain fell outside. "Why, Sarah? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you made it clear yourself that you don't believe in me. You never have." "That's," he tried to object, but the words caught in his throat. He lowered his head. "Unfair. I guess it's fair." "I guess." He took a deep breath, and there was something heavy, long accumulated, in the sound. "You've always been so quiet, not like Marcus and Jenna. I thought you needed strict guidelines, direction. I thought I was helping, guiding you toward more realistic goals, trying to protect you from disappointment." He looked at me directly, and for the first time in many, many years, there was not a shred of judgment in his gaze. There was only the bitter, naked truth. I was wrong. These 2 words hung in the air between us. Simple. Devastating. I'd never heard them from him before. "Marcus is going through a tough time right now," he continued, looking away. "Amanda, too. Your mother is confused. She feels betrayed. Jenna called me last night in tears. She can't understand what happened. What happened is that you all unanimously decided that I was a family disgrace and rescinded my invitation to New Year's," I said, my voice breaking, much to my horror. "And then you discovered that I wasn't the disgrace." "We never thought you were a disgrace, Sarah." I silently took out my phone, found the messages, and handed it to him. He took the phone with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the lines. My fiancé must not know about your situation. The color slowly drained from his face. His jaw tensed painfully. This is unacceptable. But it's fair. That's exactly how you all saw me, the one who doesn't fit in, the one who will ruin the impression. Sorry, he breathed out, the word quiet but clear. For what exactly, I asked, and my question seemed to surprise him. He paused, peering into his cup, as if the answer was written on the bottom. For not asking what truly motivated you, for thinking you needed my guidance, not my faith in you, for not celebrating your MIT the way we celebrated Marcus's Princeton, for, his voice trailed off, for not knowing my daughter. A lump formed in my throat. I looked at his graying temples, at the wrinkles around his eyes that had become so noticeable. That article said you have 450 employees, he continued, and a new, unfamiliar note appeared in his voice. Not pride, but a kind of stunned respect. That you've created $300 million in value for your investors. That your technology can revolutionize global logistics. He shook his head, and the movement conveyed all the bitterness of his epiphany. And I thought you needed my help finding an entry-level job. Yes, I'm proud of you, Sarah. I should have told you this 6 years ago. I'm telling you this now. I took a deep breath. The air in the coffee shop smelled of bitter coffee and old pain, finally beginning to dissipate. Thank you, I breathed out, and that was all I could say. He looked at me, and I saw an unfamiliar uncertainty in his eyes. Can we... He hesitated, searching for the right words. Is there a way forward? For us? For the family? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Marcus sent an apology yesterday, 3 sentences, and he ended with, "It was really hard for Amanda." Dad winced, as if he'd tasted something bitter. Mom called. She asked if I could somehow mend my relationship with Amanda's family. Jenna's wondering if I could find clients for her husband's consulting firm. It's not okay, Dad. No, he agreed quietly. It's not okay. He was silent for a long moment, staring into his empty cup. What do you need from us, Sarah? What do you want? I need you to finally see me, I said, my voice shaking with the overwhelming force of that desire. Not as a problem daughter to manage, not as weird, not fitting in, not as a resource, just me, the CEO, the person I've always been. You just never looked. He nodded slowly, and in that nod, there was the weight of acceptance. That's fair. You're right. He pushed his cup away. I can't answer for Marcus, Mom, or Jenna, but I'd like to try, to see you, if you'll let me. And what would that look like? Dinner, once a month, just the 2 of us. You tell me about your company, about your business. I listen. I learn about your life, about what you're building. He paused, struggling to find the words. I'll try to make up for 6 years of lost fatherhood. Despite everything, the corners of my lips twitched. You weren't a terrible father. I was absent. That's worse. Once a month, I agreed. But the first time he gives me career advice, I get up and leave. He laughed, dryly but sincerely. Agreed. 3 months later, Marcus and Amanda broke up. I learned about it through Jenna, who learned about it from my mom, who, in turn, heard about it from the secretary of Marcus's therapist. Our family communication channels remained absurd. Amanda, it was reported, declared that she couldn't commit to a life with someone from a family with complicated dynamics, which was a polite euphemism for, I can't bear the humiliation of having pitied you for a year and a half, only to find out you could have bought my father's company if you'd wanted. I didn't want to. I had more important plans. Dad and I had dinner once a month, as agreed. He listened. Really listened. Asked about the team, about the technology, about the vision. He learned the difference between A and C rounds. He stopped giving advice. At the 3rd dinner, he said, I told my golf buddies about you, about Meridian, showed them the article. They were impressed. Good. One asked why I'd never heard me mention you before. He blushed. I didn't have a good answer. So what did you say? That I'm an idiot who didn't recognize a genius when he sat across from him at the dinner table. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It was warm and firm. You're learning. It took Mom longer. Our first coffee was awkward. She apologized, then defended her apology. We agreed to try again in a few months. Jenna sent me a request on LinkedIn and asked if Meridian was hiring. I said yes, but through the standard process. She unfollowed me on Facebook. Marcus didn't contact me for 4 months. Then, in April, a real apology arrived. No, it's been hard for me. No caveats. Simply, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I want to improve. I replied, thank you. Let me know when you're ready. And I kept building. Meridian acquired TechFlow. We integrated teams, updated our technologies, expanded into 6 new markets. Revenue grew 53%. Forbes upgraded my 40 under 40 status to a full cover. The headline read, "The Quiet Billionaire, How Sarah Chin Built an Empire While Her Family Wasn't Looking." I framed the cover and hung it in my office. Not for them, for myself. A reminder, the only one who should believe in you is yourself, and that the best revenge is no revenge at all. It's success so resounding that those who underestimated you are forced to rethink their entire reality. The morning after the cover came out, I received a message from Marcus. Saw the cover. You look good. Thank you. If that means anything, I'm glad I was wrong about you. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I typed, glad you see this. Let's grab coffee sometime. I'd love to. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Perhaps it never will be. But it was a beginning. Sometimes that's enough. To move on, to build, to finally breathe deeply in the world you created yourself.